It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday morning at Ridgewood Industries. By noon, a man's life would be upended, his reputation destroyed, his job gone, and his name whispered in hushed disbelief across every break room in the building. All because he did something everyone thought was right. He helped an elderly woman who had collapsed in the parking lot. The reason his CEO gave for firing him? Company image. But what no one knew then, not his co-workers, not the police, not even the CEO herself, was that the old lady he helped wasn't who she appeared to be, and her fall was an accident. Marcus Wright was the kind of man you couldn't help but trust. 42 years old, a forklift operator at Ridgewood Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company in Columbus, Ohio. Marcus had worked there for almost 15 years. He was known for his calm eyes, quiet strength, and the way he always helped new hires without being asked. He was one of the few workers who knew the factory's entire layout like the back of his hand. If a machine jammed, he could fix it. If someone got hurt, he was the first to rush over. To the supervisors, Marcus was reliable. To his co-workers, he was family. And to his little daughter, Ava, he was a hero. Every morning before his shift, Marcus dropped Ava off at school, her curly hair bouncing as she waved from the curb. He'd smile, promise her a pancake breakfast on Saturday, then drive off in his old red Chevy, coffee steaming in the cup holder. He was a man of routine, of dignity. Until the day everything went wrong. It was October 4th, 2019. The morning was crisp, the kind where the wind smelled faintly of rust and rain. Workers clocked in at 7 a.m. sharp. Marcus parked his truck near the loading bay and was heading toward the employee entrance when he saw her, an elderly woman stumbling near the sidewalk. She looked frail, gray hair escaping from under her knitted cap. Her grocery bag tore open, oranges rolling across the pavement. Then she fell. Marcus didn't hesitate. He ran over, dropping his lunchbox, and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, you okay? Can you hear me?" he asked, checking her pulse with shaking hands. A few others looked on from a distance, unsure, while Marcus called out, "Somebody get help!" Within minutes, security cameras captured Marcus helping her sit up, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders, and staying by her side until an ambulance arrived. When paramedics took her away, Marcus signed the incident report for the company's liability log. Standard procedure, and then walked back inside, a little shaken but relieved. He didn't know that in less than 48 hours, that act of compassion would be twisted into a corporate scandal that Ridgewood CO, Patricia Whitmore, was a woman whose image mattered more than anything else. She had built her company's reputation on precision, control, and immaculate branding. Every photo, every press release, every handshake, all calculated perfection. When she received a call from a local newspaper asking for comment about a factory worker's heroic act, her first reaction wasn't pride. It was anger. She didn't like stories she didn't approve. And when she saw the security footage, Marcus crouched beside the woman, his reflective vest dirty from kneeling on the pavement. She frowned. Why didn't he call HR before involving emergency services? She demanded in the executive meeting the next morning. This is an image issue. Liability. We can't afford this kind of unsanctioned exposure. Her assistant hesitated. "Ma'am," he was helping an old woman who fell. "I don't care what she was," Patricia snapped. "He violated safety protocol. We are a professional corporation, not a charity." The room went silent, and that was the moment Marcus Wright's fate was sealed. Friday, October 6th, Marcus was called into HR. Angela Holloway, the company's ICHR director, sat across from him with a blank face. "Marcus," she began, sliding a folder across the desk, "we reviewed your recent conduct and found that your actions, while well-intentioned, were in violation of Ridgewood's emergency response policy." Marcus frowned. "Violation? I call for help." The woman fell. Angela interrupted, tone surgical. "You acted without notifying your supervisor, and you left your assigned area during active shift time. The CEO feels this reflects poor judgment. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated." He stared at her, unblinking. "You're firing me for helping someone?" She folded her hands. "For acting outside company protocol." Marcus left the office in disbelief. His co-workers watched in silence as security escorted him out. He didn't argue, didn't shout, just walked to his truck, jacket draped over his arm, and drove away. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, hands trembling, while Ava drew pictures beside him. "Daddy, why are you sad?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Just a long day, sweetheart." By Monday, word had gotten out. A co-worker leaked the firing on social media. Within hours, hashtag Justice for Marcus began trending locally. Black worker fired for helping elderly woman. Ridgewood CEO under fire. News vans camped outside the factory gates. Employees whispered in the break room. Patricia Whitmore issued a carefully worded statement. "While we appreciate acts of kindness, Ridgewood Industries must uphold procedural integrity for the safety of all employees." But something about the old lady's identity didn't add up. The paramedics who treated her said her ID had no emergency contact. Her name, Helen Davis, didn't appear in local records. She had vanished after being discharged. No family, no address, no follow-up. Just gone. And Caitlin Moore, a 32-year-old local reporter known for digging where others didn't. She first heard about Marcus's story through a Facebook post shared over 1,000 times. But when she visited Ridgewood's HR department for comment, she noticed something odd. The security footage of the incident was suddenly under review and unavailable for viewing. "That's convenient," she muttered, jotting notes. Later, she found Marcus sitting in his truck outside the old diner near his home. He didn't want to talk at first. Too tired. Too humiliated. But when she mentioned the missing footage and the strange disappearance of the woman he'd helped, Marcus looked up. "That lady, she didn't say much," he said slowly. "Just one thing before they took her away." Caitlin leaned in. "What did she say?" Marcus frowned, recalling the tremor in her voice. She said, "Tell him the book is open again." Neither of them understood what it meant then, but it would become the key to unraveling everything. Caitlin began digging into Ridgewood's history. At first, it seemed clean. No major lawsuits, no scandals. But when she traced the company's land records, she found that Ridgewood's factory sat on property once owned by the Davis family, including a woman named Helen Marie Davis, whose husband had died in a workplace fire on that same lot in 1987. The company at that time? Whitmore Holdings, owned by Patricia Whitmore's father. Caitlin's pulse quickened. What if the woman Marcus helped wasn't just a random passerby? What if she had come back for something, or someone, behind closed doors? Patricia Whitmore wasn't calm. For years, she'd buried the truth about that fire, a chemical explosion that killed 3 workers, including Helen's husband. The company had settled quietly, falsifying safety records to avoid liability. The old woman showing up near Ridgewood's factory wasn't coincidence. Patricia recognized her from the old files the moment she saw the footage. But she couldn't let anyone know, because Helen Davis's reappearance meant the past she buried was surfacing, and Marcus's kindness had accidentally brought it to light. Her next move was swift. She contacted her legal team, destroyed old employee logs, and ordered internal security to erase the footage. But one copy survived, because an overnight IT worker, a nervous man named Gerald Pike, had saved a backup on a flash drive, just in case. Gerald wasn't the kind of man who liked attention. He was pale, soft-spoken, and had worked quietly under Ridgewood's IT department for 8 years. But when he overheard Patricia's phone call instructing her assistant to get rid of that old woman's file, something in him broke. He contacted Caitlin anonymously, sending her a cryptic email. "The footage you're looking for, it's real. And there's more. Check the 1987 incident file. Code name, Homestead." Caitlin traced the code to an old project. Project Homestead, a rural housing development Ridgewood had once owned through a subsidiary. Several black and low-income families had been displaced when the project was shut down after unexplained contamination. Among them, the Davis family, and Marcus Wright's grandparents. When Caitlin showed Marcus the evidence, he stared in disbelief. "My grandparents lived out there," he said softly. "I remember my dad talking about losing their land. Said some company tricked them out of it." Caitlin nodded. That company was Whitmore Holdings, Patricia's father. The pieces began to fit. The firing, the old woman, the missing files. Marcus realized he wasn't fired for violating policy. He was fired because he had accidentally helped the one woman who could expose everything. A week later, Ridgewood's PR department held a press conference. Patricia appeared calm and unbothered, insisting Marcus's firing was an unfortunate misunderstanding. But midway through, a reporter shouted, "Ms. Whitmore, can you comment on the 1987 Whitmore Holdings fire that killed 3 workers, including Helen Davis's husband?" Her composure cracked for just a moment, a flicker of panic in her icy blue eyes. "No comment," she said, and hurried off stage. That same night, Gerald Pike's car was found abandoned on County Road 19. His phone, wallet, and laptop were gone. Police ruled it as voluntary disappearance. But Caitlin didn't buy it. Inside Ridgewood's network, there was one folder Patricia hadn't managed to delete, hidden under an encrypted drive. It contained the words, "Project Homestead Confidential." Caitlin managed to recover fragments of it. Chemical testing results, property acquisition contracts, and internal memos signed by Patricia's father. The document suggested that the land Ridgewood built its current plant on was contaminated with industrial waste, and that the fire in 1987 might have been caused by illegal storage of toxic solvents. Helen Davis's husband, Samuel, had filed a complaint days before the explosion. It was never investigated. The more Caitlin uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Someone was watching her. Her tires were slashed one night. Her editor received a cease and desist letter. And Marcus, now unemployed and under stress, found strange cars parked across from his home. Then, 2 weeks after the firing, it happened again. A security guard at Ridgewood reported seeing an elderly woman in a blue coat wandering near the gate after midnight. When police arrived, there was no one, but on the asphalt, near the same spot she'd fallen weeks earlier, lay a small leather notebook. Inside were handwritten entries dated from 1987, signed Helen Davis. The last entry read, "If they think fire erased the truth, they're wrong. The book is open again." The same phrase the woman had whispered to Marcus. Caitlin arranged to meet Marcus the next morning to hand him the notebook, but she never showed up. Her car was found wrecked on the edge of a ravine outside Columbus. Her phone was missing. Police called it an accident caused by brake failure, but the autopsy revealed something chilling. Her seatbelt had been cut from the inside. Marcus, heartbroken and furious, realized this wasn't just corporate corruption. It was murder, wrapped in legal paperwork and PR smiles. He swore to finish what Caitlin started. Marcus took the notebook to a retired police officer, Derek Sanders, who'd known the Davis case from decades ago. Derek agreed to look into it, but warned him, "Once you go down this road, you can't come back. These people bury the truth, and anyone who gets close to it." Together, they began piecing together how Ridgewood's modern success was built on old crimes, illegal dumping, forged safety audits, falsified property deeds, all covered by generations of the Whitmore family. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. The woman Marcus had saved wasn't just an old lady. She was the last surviving witness of what really happened the night of the 1987 fire. And someone wanted her silence for good. When Marcus started speaking publicly, giving small interviews, showing a notebook, hinting at a cover-up, Ridgewood responded with legal fury. They accused him of defamation, of trespassing, of stealing company property. But the pressure only made him stronger. He began working with a group of former Ridgewood employees, men and women who'd been laid off, harassed, or ignored. They called themselves the Homestead 12, the descendants of the displaced families, and together, they vowed to bring the truth to light. Late one night, Marcus received a call from a blocked number. A calm, cold male voice said, "Stop digging, Mr. Wright. The past is better buried." He recognized the voice instantly. It belonged to Edward Sloan, the company's financial auditor, the same man who had signed off on the falsified land deals decades earlier. Sloan wasn't just an accountant. He was the Whitmore family's enforcer, polite, methodical, and terrifyingly efficient. Marcus hung up, but his hands shook. He looked down at the notebook, its pages worn and fragile. And on the last one, written in trembling ink, was something he hadn't noticed before. If you're reading this, the key is in the soil, under the red oak. The red oak still stood on the old homestead property, now fenced off behind Ridgewood's factory. At dawn, Marcus and Derek drove out there with flashlights and shovels. The air was thick with fog, the hum of machines distant in the dark. They found the oak easily, roots sprawling like veins through the earth. Underneath, after half an hour of digging, Marcus's shovel hit metal. It was a rusted lockbox. Inside, burnt papers have a photograph and an old employee ID badge. The name on it read, Patricia Whitmore Sr., the CEO's mother. Derek scanned the documents. "Look at this," he whispered. "Chemical contracts, bribes, even falsified death certificates. This is the missing link." Marcus stared at the photograph. It showed Helen Davis standing beside a group of workers, including his grandfather, and next to them, a young girl about 10 years old, holding a notebook. The girl was Patricia Whitmore. Helen Davis had known her since childhood. Marcus realized the truth hit deeper than he imagined. Patricia wasn't just covering up her father's crimes. She was covering up her own. As the first light of dawn broke over the ridge, the ground trembled faintly. Machinery starting up in the distance. Derek froze. "You hear that?" Engines, tires crunching gravel, headlights cutting through the fog. Two black SUVs approached fast. Marcus shoved a notebook and lockbox into his backpack. Derek grabbed his arm. "Run." The first SUV door opened, and a familiar voice echoed to the cold air. "Mr. Wright," Edward Sloan said calmly, stepping out with that polite, chilling smile. "You've been very busy." Marcus's heart pounded. The truth was finally in his hands, but so were the men who do anything to destroy it. The morning air smelled of iron and smoke. Marcus Wright could still hear the crunch of boots in the gravel as he and retired Officer Derek Sanders crouched behind the red oak tree. Edward Sloan's voice carried the mist like a blade cutting silk. "Mr. Wright, let's talk about what doesn't belong to you." They had found the lockbox, the proof. Inside it, falsified death certificates, chemical contracts, and the photo that tied Ridgewood's empire to a 40-year-old crime. But before Marcus could even process what he'd uncovered, the men who buried the truth had come to take it back permanently. Derek grabbed Marcus by the arm, whispering sharply, "Run to the drainage tunnel. Go!" They dashed into the trees, breath ragged, headlights slicing the fog behind them. Gunmetal glinted briefly. Not the sound of warning shots, but the clicks of weapons being readied. Marcus's heart pounded as they dove into the tunnel mouth near the ravine, an old concrete pipe that ran beneath the property line. Mud splashed. Water chilled his hands. Behind them, Sloan's men searched with flashlights. Split up, the red oak side. They couldn't have gone far. When Marcus and Derek finally emerged on the other end, breathless and soaked, they climbed into Derek's truck hidden under brush. As the engine coughed to life, Marcus looked down at the muddy backpack on his lap. The lockbox still inside. Derek exhaled. "You realize what you're holding could destroy an entire corporation?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure it does." That night, they holed up in Derek's old safe house outside Groveport, a small, dim trailer lined with faded case files and coffee stains. Marcus opened the lockbox carefully under lamplight. Among the charred pages, one stood out, a handwritten note signed HD. "To whoever finds this, they took my husband, my land, and my voice, but not my truth. The fire was an accident. It was their test." "Their test?" Marcus murmured. Derek frowned. "Sounds like deliberate ignition. Controlled burn, maybe?" Beneath the note, another document, a Ridgewood internal memo from 1987. Stamped confidential. Project Homestead Test Phase. It listed chemical compounds, testing schedules, and signatures, including one by Patricia Whitmore Sr. Derek leaned back slowly. She authorized the test. The same chemicals caused the explosion that killed Helen's husband. Marcus rubbed his temples. "So Ridgewood used that fire to cover up illegal testing?" Derek nodded. "And every CEO since, including Patricia Jr., built their empire on that lie." While going through Caitlin Moore's recovered phone, retrieved by one of Derek's contacts of the evidence impound, Marcus found an unsent voicemail addressed to him. Her voice, strained but determined, played softly through the speaker. Marcus, if you're hearing this, I think they're watching me. The file you need isn't at Ridgewood. It's in their off-site archive, a property called Birchfield. Look for a caretaker named Pike. He'll help you. Be careful. They don't want the truth out. Marcus froze. Pike! Derek met his eyes. Gerald Pike, the IT guy who vanished. 2 days later, under the guise of night, Marcus and Derek drove to Birchfield Industrial Storage, a decaying warehouse about 30 miles from Columbus. The sign out front was barely legible, its letters corroded by time. The place looked abandoned, but the power line still hummed. They pried open a side door and stepped into darkness lit by weak fluorescent flicker. Dust floated like ghosts in the stale air. Rows upon rows of rusted cabinets stood silent, each labeled with old project names. Homestead Drift Line, Ardent Chemicals, Phase B. In the back corner, a desk light glowed faintly. Someone was there. Gerald Pike? Derek called softly. The man who turned slowly in his chair looked exhausted. Beard overgrown, eyes hollow, shirt stained with oil and fear. He raised his trembling hands. You shouldn't have come here. Marcus stepped forward. You sent Caitlin the file, didn't you? You saved the footage. Pike nodded. I did, but that was before I realized how deep it goes. Ridgewood isn't just one company, Marcus. It's a web. They own the labs, the regulators, even parts of police board. He slid open a drawer and handed them a thick envelope. Inside, photos of workers from the 1980s, aerial maps of farmland, and a small USB drive labeled Homestead_Fire footage. Pike looked down, voice breaking. They burned those men alive to hide what they were doing, experimenting with volatile solvents in residential zones. Helen's husband was going to report them, so they set the fire. Marcus's breath hitched. They killed him. Pike nodded, tears glinting in the flickering light. And now they're cleaning up anyone who knows. A sudden crash echoed from the hall. Metal clattered. Pike's face went pale. They found us. The door exploded inward, masked men in tactical gear storming through, flashlights blinding. Derek shoved Marcus behind a file cabinet and returned fire with his old service pistol. Go, Marcus. Get the drive out. Pike shouted, There's a back exit through the boiler room, before a bullet struck the wall beside him. Marcus grabbed the USB and bolted through the corridor, papers flying behind him like ash. He sprinted down rusted stairs into the boiler room, flames licking from a leaking gas pipe. He barely had time to react before the explosion thundered. Heat surged through the tunnel as he dove out through a side grate into the night. Behind him, the Birchfield warehouse roared, a furnace devouring every secret held. Derek and Pike were nowhere in sight. Marcus awoke hours later in a nearby ditch, covered in soot and blood. Sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks swarmed what remained of Birchfield, twisted steel and smoke. Authorities declared it a storage accident, but Marcus knew better. He was listed among the presumed dead, and for once, he didn't correct them. That night, hiding in an abandoned motel, he opened a USB on Derek's old laptop. The file began with a timestamp, July 13th, 1987, Ridgewood Holdings Test Site, Homestead, Ohio. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable. It showed workers loading barrels labeled methyl toluene, a banned solvent, into an underground tank. One of the men shouted something. Sparks, then flame, and in the background, a figure watching from a distance, a young girl, clutching a notebook. Patricia Whitmore, Jr. Marcus stared at the paused frame, the unmistakable platinum blonde hair, the same icy eyes. She had been there when the fire began. He rewound the footage. The girl turned briefly toward the camera. Fear, shock, maybe guilt, then static. Marcus realized the truth. She hadn't just inherited her father's crimes. She had witnessed them. And somewhere in her, that guilt had festered into the obsession with control, perfection, an image that defined her reign at Ridgewood. But what if she hadn't been the only child there? The The footage showed movement beside her, another smaller shadow, running from the flames. Caitlin's notes had mentioned multiple survivors. Who was the second child? 3 nights later, Marcus sat alone in a diner outside Dayton, hoodie up, laptop bag beside him. He watched news footage on the TV. Birchfield warehouse explosion. 2 confirmed dead. Then he heard the bell over the door. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. Edward Sloan slid into the booth across from him, expression calm. Polite. "You're a difficult man to find," he said. Marcus didn't move. "Guess dying helps with that." Sloan smirked faintly. "You have something that doesn't belong to you. The drive. The notebook. Give them back. And this can end quietly." Marcus leaned forward. "And quietly? You burned a man alive. You silenced a journalist. How many more people have to die to keep your secret?" Sloan's tone stayed eerily measured. "Secrets keep order. Chaos destroys everything." Marcus stared into his pale gray eyes, and in that moment he saw something hollow. Not malice, just obedience. "You're not doing this for her," Marcus said. "You're doing it because you believe in her." Sloan said nothing. Then, almost softly, "Belief is a dangerous thing." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table and stood. "Consider this your only warning, Mr. Wright." When Marcus unfolded it, his heart dropped. It was a photograph. Ava, his 8-year-old daughter, walking home from school. That night, Marcus called Derek's old contact in the force, Captain Harlan Briggs. But instead of reassurance, Briggs's voice was cold. "Marcus, you're in deep water. Sloan has friends everywhere. You need to disappear." Marcus clenched his jaw. "I can't disappear. They threatened my kid." Briggs sighed. "Then get evidence to the media. Fast." Marcus hung up, pacing. He knew it was risky, but he couldn't just hide. Ava was all he had left. He copied the footage and the documents onto 3 drives, mailing one anonymously to a journalist contact in Chicago and another to a whistleblower group online. Then he packed what he could, ready to take Ava somewhere safe. But when he got home, the front door was open. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Marcus's breath quickened as he stepped inside, flashlight trembling. Ava's backpack lay by the couch. Her shoes were still by the door. On the table, a single envelope. Inside, a note written in clean, looping handwriting. "She's safe for now, but we need to talk. Tomorrow, 9 p.m., Whitmore Estate. Come alone." P.W. Marcus's pulse raced. Patricia, Whitmore wanted to meet. The next night, Marcus drove to the Whitmore Estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town, framed by iron gates and manicured silence. He parked heart-hammering and walked up the marble steps. The door opened before he knocked. Patricia stood there, immaculate as ever, pearls around her neck, a calm smile frozen in place. "Mr. Wright," she said softly, "please, come in." The interior was all white marble and glass, sterile and cold. The faint scent of lilies filled the air. She gestured to a chair. "Tea." Marcus ignored it. "Where's my daughter?" Patricia met his gaze evenly. "She's unharmed, I assure you, but you've stirred something very dangerous, Marcus. Things you don't understand." "Then explain it," he said. She sighed, folding her hands. "My father built Ridgewood on progress. Mistakes were made, but what good does digging them up do now? You think exposing us will bring justice? It will only destroy lives, yours included." Marcus's voice trembled with anger. "You killed Caitlin. You burned Gerald. You destroyed families for profit." Patricia's mask faltered for just a second. "I didn't kill anyone. Sloan, he acts without my consent sometimes." Marcus stepped closer. "Then stop him. End this." Her eyes glinted, sharp, resigned. "It's too late. You've already set things in motion." As she spoke, Marcus noticed something behind her, a faint light bleeding from a door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. He moved toward it slowly. Patricia didn't stop him. Inside was a private office, walls lined with photos, newspaper clippings, and documents pinned like trophies. At the center, a framed photograph of the homestead fire site, and beside it a newer one, A young girl with curly dark hair, smiling beside a woman in a cardigan. Ava and Patricia. Marcus's knees nearly buckled. You. Patricia spoke softly behind him. She's special, Marcus. You raised her well. But she deserves a future free from your war. He turned, fury and fear twisting inside him. Where is she? Patricia's expression hardened. Safe. For now. Then came the sound. Faint footsteps upstairs. Ava's voice muffled. Daddy? Marcus lunged toward the staircase, but suddenly the lights cut out. In the dark, a single beam of light flickered from a doorway above. Marcus shouted her name, stumbling through the shadows. Then a crack. A sharp thud. He froze as Edward Sloan's silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a small flashlight, and something else glinting in his other hand. Mr. Wright. Sloan said calmly, his face half hidden in shadow. I told you, belief is dangerous. Behind him, Ava's faint sob echoed from another room. Marcus took a step forward. If you touch her... Sloan cut him off, voice chillingly calm. I don't need to. She already knows the truth. And soon so will you. The flashlight clicked off. Darkness swallowed everything. The morning the verdict came down, the sky over Masonville was a wash of gray, that dull kind of overcast that felt more like a mirror of human exhaustion than weather. Reporters were lined up on the courthouse steps, their cameras angled toward the double doors where a man's entire life would soon be decided. Inside, the hum of whispered speculation mixed with the nervous shuffling of feet on marble floors. Marcus Wright sat at the defense table, hands clasped, his once steady worker's fingers trembling slightly. He wore the same dark blue suit his wife Danielle had saved up to buy, the same suit he'd worn to every court hearing. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of the last 2 years. The public humiliation, the lies, the investigations, the betrayals, and the endless waiting for justice that always seemed to move an inch too slow for people like him. Across from him sat the CEO, Calvin Remsen, perfectly composed, flanked by attorneys who whispered and scribbled on yellow legal pads. His cufflinks gleamed even under the courthouse's dim lights. He hadn't lost that polished smirk that infuriated Marcus from the beginning. That look of someone who thought power was a shield from consequence. Angela Holloway, the company's HR director, was in the back row, avoiding eye contact. Her once commanding posture had wilted since she turned over evidence weeks ago. When she first walked into the DA's office, trembling, clutching that manila folder full of internal emails and falsified reports, she looked like a woman trying to exhale a decade of guilt. It was her confession that cracked the case open. 2 weeks earlier, under the glare of a single desk lamp, Angela told prosecutors everything. The company's narrative that Marcus had violated safety protocols by abandoning his post was a fabrication. The truth? Calvin Remsen had personally ordered her to terminate Marcus. Why? Because Marcus had embarrassed a wealthy client, Mrs. Whitmore, by publicly pointing out the negligence that had nearly killed her. Mrs. Whitmore, the elderly woman Marcus had helped in the parking lot that day, had been injured because the company's delivery trucks had been repeatedly ordered to skip maintenance inspections to save costs. Marcus had noticed the oil spill, reported it, and tried to prevent a lawsuit waiting to happen. But instead of being rewarded for his diligence, he was punished for making Remsen look bad in front of investors. Angela's voice broke during confession. He told me to make an example of him. He said we couldn't afford another whistleblower. Remsen's arrogance ran deeper than anyone realized. Marcus wasn't just a scapegoat. He was a warning to the rest of the workers. Keep your head down. Stay silent. Be grateful. And for months, it worked. Until Angela broke. Prosecutor Rachel Nguyen, sharp, relentless, and unwilling to bow to corporate pressure, pieced together a case that revealed how systemic the corruption ran. The internal memos were damning. Cost-cutting measures that risked worker safety, falsified accident logs, and a paper trail leading directly to Remsen's office. But it wasn't just the paper trail that swayed the jury. It was the people. One by one, former employees testified. Truck drivers, janitors, warehouse workers, all of them black or brown men and women, stood up and shared stories of retaliation, intimidation, and quiet despair. Marcus sat silently as they spoke. Every word confirmed what he'd always known, but never had the means to prove. The company didn't see them as people, just replaceable cogs. Danielle sat in the front row every day, her hand resting on her husband's shoulder when the cameras turned away. She had become the quiet center of the storm, the woman who refused to let her family be destroyed by a lie. Just when the defense thought they could sway the jury with polished rhetoric and denials, the prosecution unveiled one last surprise, a piece of footage no one knew existed. It was from a small body camera worn by a delivery security subcontractor on the day Marcus was fired. The video showed Marcus helping Mrs. Whitmore, steadying her arm, calling for medical help, and making sure she was safe. In the background, Remsen could be heard muttering to a regional manager, "That's not the image we want. Get rid of him before this turns into a pity story." The courtroom gasped. Even the judge leaned forward. For Marcus, the words hit harder than a punch. It wasn't just betrayal. It was confirmation that everything he had suffered had been engineered from the top. When the jury returned, you could hear the buzz of anticipation ripple through the benches. The foreman, a middle-aged black woman with steady eyes, stood and read the verdict. We find defendant Calvin Remsen guilty on all counts: wrongful termination, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud. Remsen's face drained of color. The smirk was gone. He looked around as if searching for an escape that wasn't there. Marcus didn't cheer. He didn't cry. He simply exhaled, a long, trembling release of air that seemed to empty years of pain from his chest. Danielle squeezed his hand, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. In that moment, justice felt tangible, but the victory was fragile, because as soon as Remsen was let out, whispers began circulating about a sealed file, about investors connected to politicians, about a missing witness who had fled the state days before the verdict. The case sent shockwaves through Masonville. Workers who had long been silent began to speak. Anonymous letters were published in local papers, detailing other incidents, other lives crushed under the weight of greed. Churches held meetings. Protests formed outside the corporate headquarters, chanting Marcus's name. But there were also threats, anonymous calls to Danielle's phone, cars parked outside their house for hours. Someone wanted to remind them that power never loses quietly. Detective Laura Monroe, the same one who had first doubted Marcus's claims, personally took over the protection detail. She told him one night, "You didn't just fight for yourself, Marcus. You rattled something bigger." 2 months later, as life began to settle, Marcus received a call that changed everything. It was Angela Holloway. Her voice was frantic. "They're covering up again, Marcus. Remsen wasn't working alone. There's a second fund, offshore accounts. The money was funneled through shell companies. And someone new's taking over his position." Marcus froze. "Who?" Angela hesitated. "Someone you know." The line went dead. Within days, Angela disappeared. Her car was found abandoned near a rest stop on Highway 14. No signs of struggle, but her purse and phone were missing. The police called it a personal matter. Marcus didn't believe that for a second. The deeper he looked, the more connections he found. New names, familiar faces, even a few people from within the same union that had once promised to protect him. Danielle begged him to stop digging. "You got your justice, Marcus. Don't lose your peace." But he couldn't, not when he realized what was at stake. One late evening, Marcus sat in his garage, sorting through a box of old documents. Tucked between papers was something he didn't remember ever seeing. A sealed envelope with his name scrawled in a hurried hand. He tore it open. Inside was a flash drive. The label read, "In case something happens to me, H." Marcus plugged it into his laptop. The screen filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and encrypted emails. Among them, one stood out, a message from a law firm, Whitmore and Sloan Holdings. The Whitmore name, the same old lady he'd helped that day. And Sloan, Edward Sloan, the quiet, calculating corporate auditor who testified on behalf of the prosecution. But the email wasn't what he expected. It wasn't incriminating Remsen. It was from Remsen. Transfer complete. Ensure the replacement project begins quietly. Whitmore's estate must not be linked to the new subsidiary. Use Wright's name as a diversion. Marcus's pulse quickened. His name was being used again. A cold realization hit him. Remsen wasn't the top of the ladder. He was a pawn. Someone else had orchestrated everything, and they were still out there, still using Marcus's case to bury something far larger. The next morning, Marcus stood on his porch as the sun broke through the gray sky. The air was calm, deceptively peaceful. He looked down the street, the same one where neighbors once avoided eye contact, now lined with people waving, nodding, calling out support. But beneath his smile, he knew the fight wasn't over. He slipped the flash drive into his pocket and turned to Danielle. If the truth dies with me, then everything I went through means nothing. She looked at him, fear and love mixing in her eyes. Then we tell together. He nodded. Somewhere far away, a news alert pinged on his phone. New CEO appointed at Whitmore and Sloan Holdings. Edward Sloan. Marcus froze. The same man who had stood on the witness stand, promising justice, had just taken the throne left vacant by Calvin Remsen. The screen fades to black. A narrator's voice would say, if this were a documentary, sometimes justice isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the first layer of the truth. Marcus's story isn't just about a man wronged by power. It's about a system that punishes compassion and rewards silence. It's about what happens when doing the right thing costs everything. And it's about how corruption wears 1,000 faces, some smiling, some crying, some swearing they're on your side. He helped an old woman once, and that act of kindness became the spark that revealed the rot beneath an empire. But in the world we live in, good men like Marcus often have to fight twice. Once for justice, and once to keep the truth alive after the cameras move on. As the credits of his life storm fade, one question lingers for us all. When doing what's right puts everything you love at risk, your job, your safety, your name, would you still do it? Because sometimes the price of integrity isn't losing your job. It's realizing how few people are willing to stand beside you when you do.